The morning light from Kepler 438c painted the hull of the research vessel Aurora's Edge in shades of amber and gold. Dr. Amy pressed her face against the observation deck window, watching the alien world slowly rotate beneath them after 8 years. Months of deep space travel, seeing a living planet again, made her heart race with excitement. "Atmospheric readings are stable," announced Tom from his station at the communications array. "Oxygen levels at 22%, nitrogen at 75%. We could breathe down there without suits if needed." Captain David nodded as he reviewed the preliminary scans on his tablet. The planet below them was as xenobiologists dream, vast forests of crystalline trees that seemed to grow in perfect geometric patterns, oceans that shifted between deep purple and silver depending on the angle of the twin suns, and mountain ranges that looked like they were carved from precious stones. "Any signs of intelligent life?" David asked, though he already suspected the answer. Amy pointed to a cluster of readings on her screen. Massive heat signatures moving in organized patterns across the northern continent. "Whatever's down there, they're big and they work together." The first real proof came 3 hours later when Tom's equipment detected structured electromagnetic pulses, clearly artificial and definitely intelligent. The signals repeated in complex patterns that suggested language, mathematics, or both. "No, we're here," Tom said, his voice tight with nervous energy. "The signals started the moment we entered orbit, and they're getting stronger." David made the decision that would change everything. "Prepare the universal translator array. If they want to talk, we'll talk." The response came faster than anyone expected. A deep, grinding voice filled the bridge, speaking words that sounded like stone being crushed under immense pressure. The universal translator worked overtime, converting the alien speech into something humans could understand. "Visitors from the void," the voice said, each word carrying weight and authority. "You orbit our world without permission. State your purpose or depart immediately." David activated the communication system. "This is Captain David of the Earth. Vessel Aurora's Edge. We come in peace to study and learn. We mean no harm to your people or your world." Silence stretched for nearly an hour before the reply came. "You will meet us at the coordinates we transmit. Come with 3 of your number. No more, no weapons. No recording devices that could capture our young." Amy exchanged glances with Tom and the ship's engineer, Rick. The mention of young struck her as odd. Why would they be concerned about recordings of their children? The landing party took a shuttle down to the specified coordinates, a clearing surrounded by those strange crystalline trees. The ground beneath their feet felt solid, but somehow musical, creating soft chiming sounds with each step. They didn't have to wait long. The forest erupted with the sound of splintering crystal as 3 massive beings emerged from between the trees. Each creature stood nearly 4 meters tall, their bodies covered in sharp, angular formations that looked like living gemstones. Spinal ridges ran along their backs, each ridge ending in a razor-sharp crystal point that gleamed dangerously in the filtered sunlight. The largest of the 3 stepped forward, its movements surprisingly graceful despite its intimidating appearance. When it spoke, the sound resonated through the human's bones. "I am Elder Crix of the Thornback people. You are smaller than we expected, and you radiate warmth in ways we do not understand." Amy found her voice first. "I'm Dr. Amy, a scientist who studies living beings. We're honored to meet you, Elder Crix." Crix's crystal formations shifted slightly, creating new patterns of light and shadow across its body. "Your species presents a unique problem. Dr. Amy, you emit what our senses recognize as comfort signals, steady heartbeats. Thermal radiation, electromagnetic fields associated with contentment and safety. Is that bad?" Tom asked. "For adults of our kind, no. But our cubs have never encountered beings like you. They are drawn to warmth and comfort in ways that could prove dangerous for all involved." Rick stepped forward, his engineering mind trying to understand the mechanics. "Dangerous how?" Elder Crix's massive form seemed to grow even more imposing. "Thornback cubs imprint on sources of ultimate safety and comfort. Once bonded, they cannot be separated without severe psychological damage. Your species radiates these comfort signals constantly and unconsciously. Amy felt a chill despite the warm air. What exactly are you telling us? I am telling you that you must maintain a distance of no less than 50 meters from any thornback offspring you might encounter. This is not a request or a suggestion. This is a survival protocol that has kept our species stable for thousands of years. David nodded slowly. We understand and agree to your terms. We have no desire to cause harm or disruption to your people. The danger extends beyond simple contact, Crix continued. Our cubs are curious by nature, and your warmth signature will call to them across great distances. They may seek you out despite all warnings and barriers we place. Tom's communication equipment beeped softly, and he glanced at the readings. The electromagnetic patterns we detected, are those your cubs? No, Crix replied, and something in the grinding tone suggested amusement. Those are the songs of our builders, creating new growth in the crystal forests. Our cubs make no electromagnetic noise until they reach maturity. They communicate through harmonics and thermal variations. Amy's scientific curiosity overcame her caution. How long do your cubs remain in this vulnerable state? By your human measurements, approximately 50 of your years. During this time, they are incredibly sensitive to emotional resonance and comfort signals. A bonding incident could affect not just the cubs involved, but their entire generational cohort. The weight of responsibility settled on the human team. They had come to study alien life, but now they found themselves potentially responsible for disrupting an entire species. Developmental cycle. Elder Crix seemed to sense their concern. We do not tell you this to frighten you away. We tell you this because we have observed your species through your transmissions and broadcasts. You show kindness to creatures unlike yourselves. This kindness, while admirable, could be catastrophic if directed toward our young. David looked at his team, seeing the same mixture of fascination and worry reflected in their faces. We'll establish our research station at a safe distance and maintain strict protocols. You have our word. Your word may not be enough, Crix sighed quietly. If our cubs encounter you, they will not understand protocols or distances. They will only understand that they have found something that calls to the deepest part of their nature, the need for absolute safety and unconditional acceptance. As the meeting concluded and the humans prepared to return to their shuttle, Elder Crix delivered one final warning that would prove prophetic. Remember this above all else: if bonding occurs, there is no protocol in our history for reversing it. The cubs who bond will choose their heart family, and that choice cannot be undone. 3 days of careful observation had taught Tom more about alien plant life than he ever imagined possible. The crystalline trees weren't just beautiful, they were alive in ways that defied human understanding, growing and reshaping themselves in response to some invisible signals he couldn't quite identify with his equipment. His morning routine had become almost meditative. Check the atmospheric readings, calibrate the biological scanners, and take sample readings from the strange musical soil that seemed to hum with its own frequency. The research camp sat exactly 52 meters from the nearest crystal formation, maintaining the safety buffer Elder Crix had demanded. Tom was adjusting the sensitivity on his electromagnetic scanner when the readings suddenly spiked. The device registered patterns unlike anything they had recorded so far, not the deep, organized pulses of the adult thornbacks, but something lighter, more playful. The signals seemed to dance across his screen in waves of color and rhythm. Amy, are you seeing this? He called across the camp. Dr. Amy looked up from her specimen analysis. Seeing what? These electromagnetic readings. They're completely different from what we've been tracking, more like music than language. Amy walked over to examine Tom's equipment. The patterns were indeed unlike anything in their database's complex, but somehow innocent, layered with harmonics that seemed to shift based on no discernible pattern. Could be atmospheric interference, she suggested, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it. Tom shook his head. The readings are too structured, too intentional, and they're moving. He adjusted his scanner's directional array, following the signal strength across the landscape. The readings led him away from the camp, deeper into the crystal forest where the trees grew taller and their formations more elaborate. "I'm going to investigate," Tom announced, gathering his portable equipment. Amy frowned. "Remember the protocols. 50 meters minimum distance from any thornback life forms." "These readings aren't matching adult thornback signatures," Tom replied. "But I'll be careful." The forest grew quieter as Tom moved deeper into the crystalline landscape. His footsteps created soft chimes against the musical ground, and the filtered light through the crystal leaves painted everything in shifting rainbows. The electromagnetic readings grew stronger with each step, accompanied now by actual sound-soft harmonic tones that seemed to come from multiple sources. Tom rounded a cluster of particularly large crystal formations and stopped dead in his tracks. 6 creatures sat in a natural clearing ahead of him, each roughly the size of a small elephant but built with the same crystalline structure as the adult thornbacks. However, where the adults had sharp, intimidating angles and dangerous spinal ridges, these beings had softer edges, and their crystal formations seemed to pulse with gentle, rainbow-colored light. Thornback cubs, the moment Tom appeared, all 6 cubs turned toward him with movements that seemed almost choreographed. Their crystal formations immediately shifted to warmer colors, golds and blues, that pulsed in rhythm with Tom's heartbeat, which he suddenly realized was racing. Tom's training screamed at him to back away immediately, but something about the cubs' behavior made him pause. They weren't approaching him. Instead, they were arranging themselves in a careful semicircle, maintaining what appeared to be exactly 50 meters of distance. The cubs had already learned about the protocol. For several minutes, nobody moved. Tom stood at the edge of the clearing while the 6 cubs observed him with what could only be described as fascination. Their crystal voices created soft, chiming harmonies that seemed to respond to his emotional state. When his initial fear subsided, their tones became warmer and more welcoming. When a moment of anxiety spiked through him, they immediately shifted to calming, steady rhythms. Tom slowly reached for his communication device. "Amy, I need you to record this. I've made contact with 6 thornback cubs and they're exhibiting remarkable behavioral adaptation." "Tom, get out of there immediately," Amy's voice crackled through the communicator. "You're violating the safety protocols." "They're maintaining the 50-meter distance," Tom replied quietly, not wanting to startle the cubs with sudden movements. "They know about the protocol, Amy. Someone taught them." The largest cub, its crystal formations a particularly beautiful shade of shifting blue-green, tilted its massive head and created a series of tones that Tom's equipment registered as incredibly complex. The other cubs responded with their own harmonic sequences, creating a conversation that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "They're talking about me," Tom realized. "The tonal patterns are shifting based on my reactions." Dr. Amy's voice came through the communicator again, tighter with worry. "Tom, Elder Crix was very clear about the dangers. Please return to base immediately." "Just a few more minutes," Tom said. "This is unprecedented interspecies behavioral observation." The cubs seemed to understand that Tom was communicating with someone else. Their crystal formations dimmed slightly, and their harmonic conversation took on what Tom could only interpret as disappointed tones. The largest cub created a series of sounds that were clearly questions, though Tom had no way to answer them. Almost without thinking, Tom sat down on the crystalline ground. The cubs' formations immediately brightened, and their harmonic tones shifted to what sounded like pure joy. They began creating more complex musical patterns, with each cub contributing different layers to an increasingly beautiful composition. "Amy, you need to hear this," Tom whispered into his communicator. "They're making music. Not just random sounds, actual composed music, and it's responding to my presence." Through his equipment, Tom watched the cubs' electromagnetic patterns shift and flow in ways that matched their vocal harmonies. Their entire bodies were musical instruments, capable of creating sounds and electromagnetic fields that could communicate emotion, intention, and something that felt remarkably like affection. The largest cub slowly stood and took a single step forward, then stopped and looked at Tom questioningly. The other cubs fell silent, watching the interaction with what appeared to be intense interest. Tom held up his hand in what he hoped was a universal stop gesture. The cub immediately stepped back to its original position and created a soft, apologetic tone. "They understand boundaries," Tom reported to Amy. "They want to come closer, but they're respecting the safety distance." For 2 hours, Tom remained in the clearing while the cubs maintained their respectful distance and continued their musical conversation. Their crystal formations cycled through colors that seemed to reflect their emotional states: warm golds when they appeared content, soft blues when they seemed curious, and gentle greens when Tom showed any signs of relaxation. As the afternoon light began to fade, Tom finally stood to return to camp. The cubs' harmonies immediately shifted to what could only be described as sadness. Their crystal formations dimmed to muted colors, and their musical patterns became slower and more melancholy. "I have to go," Tom said softly, knowing they couldn't understand his words, but hoping they might understand his tone. The largest cub created a complex series of tones that Tom's equipment registered as incredibly sophisticated. The other cubs responded with their own contributions. Building to what sounded like a question, Tom began walking back toward camp, and to his amazement, the cubs began following him. They maintained their precise 50-meter distance, moving through the crystal forest with surprising grace for creatures their size. Their harmonic conversation continued, but now it seemed to include Tom as a participant, even though he couldn't contribute to their musical language. When Tom reached the research camp, Amy and the rest of the team were waiting anxiously. The cubs arranged themselves in their semicircle at the exact edge of the safety perimeter and settled down to watch the human camp with obvious fascination. "Tom, what have you done?" Amy asked, staring at the 6 massive creatures who had clearly established a permanent vigil outside their camp. "I think," Tom said slowly, watching as the cubs' crystal formations pulsed with gentle, patient light, "I've made some friends who don't want to say goodbye." The cubs began a new harmonic sequence, more complex and beautiful than anything Tom had heard before. Their crystal formations synchronized their colors, creating waves of light that flowed from one cub to another in patterns that looked almost like language made visible. Dr. Amy checked her instruments and confirmed what Tom already suspected. Their electromagnetic readings have changed. The patterns are more organized, more intentional. It's like they're broadcasting on a frequency specifically designed to be comforting to humans. As night fell over the alien world, the cubs maintained their vigil, their crystal formations providing a soft, multicolored glow that illuminated the research camp. Their harmonic songs continued throughout the night, creating a lullaby that helped the humans sleep better than they had since arriving on the planet. Tom lay in his sleeping bag, listening to the alien music and watching the play of colored light across the ceiling of his tent. He had followed the protocol exactly, maintained the required distance, and done nothing to encourage bonding behavior. But looking at the cubs' patient, glowing forms arranged protectively around the human camp, Tom began to understand that some connections transcend rules and protocols. The cubs had made their choice, and distance was just a technicality they were willing to respect while they figured out how to make this strange new relationship work. The ground shook beneath their feet as Elder Crix approached the human research camp, accompanied by 4 other adult thornbacks whose crystal formations blazed with agitation and anger. The massive beings moved with obvious urgency, their sharp spinal ridges extended to full threatening display. Dr. Amy quickly activated the universal translator as the delegation stopped exactly at the 50-meter perimeter, directly across from where the 6 cubs maintained their patient vigil. The cubs' harmonic singing stopped immediately, replaced by softer, more subdued tones that suggested they knew they were in trouble. "You have violated our agreement," Elder Crix announced, the grinding stone voice carrying more emotion than the humans had heard before. 3 days have passed since our cubs took position around your camp. They refuse sustenance. They refuse to return to the colony. They sing only in bonding harmonics. Captain David stepped forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. Elder Crix, we followed every protocol exactly. We maintained the 50-meter distance at all times. No human has approached your cubs. The distance is irrelevant now, Crix replied, and the other adult thornbacks shifted their formations in what appeared to be agreement. The bonding process has begun. Our young ones have chosen your people as their heart family. Amy felt her stomach drop. Heart family? What exactly does that mean? The largest of the accompanying thornbacks, whose crystal formations were a deep, angry red, spoke for the first time. It means they have identified your species as their primary emotional attachment. In thornback development, cubs bond once, during their growth period, with beings they perceive as offering ultimate safety and unconditional acceptance. Tom, who had been quietly monitoring the cubs' electromagnetic signatures, looked up from his equipment. Their readings have been stable for 3 days. They don't seem distressed. They are not distressed, Crix confirmed. They are committed. Once a heart family bond begins, thornback cubs will sacrifice their own well-being to maintain proximity to their chosen family. They have already begun refusing food rather than leave this location. Rick checked his chronometer. It's been 72 hours since they arrived. How long can they go without eating? Under normal circumstances, cubs can survive without sustenance for up to 10 of your days. But bonded cubs will extend this period indefinitely, using their own crystal formations as energy sources until they enter permanent dormancy. Dr. Amy stared at the cubs, who were now creating soft, pleading harmonics while their crystal formations flickered between warm golds and worried yellows. They're willing to die rather than leave us. Death would be preferable to the alternative, the red-crystalled thornback said harshly. Forced separation from a heart family results in catatonic withdrawal that can last centuries. The cubs become living crystals, aware but unable to interact with the world around them. Captain David ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of an impossible situation. There has to be a solution. Some way to reverse or redirect the bonding process. Elder Crix's crystal formations shifted to darker colors. In 30,000 years of thornback history, no solution has ever been found. Heart-family bonding is absolute and irreversible. It is the foundation of our social structure and the reason our species has survived in harmony for millennia. But it's never happened with an alien species before, Amy pointed out. Correct. Which means we have no precedent, no protocols, and no understanding of what the consequences might be for either species. Tom looked up from his equipment again, his expression troubled. The cub's electromagnetic patterns are changing. The readings are becoming more complex, but also more unstable. As if responding to his observation, the largest cub stood and took 3 careful steps toward the human camp, stopping just short of the 50-meter boundary. Its crystal formations pulsed with urgent, colorful patterns while it created a series of complex harmonics that sounded almost like questions. It's trying to communicate something specific, Amy said, watching her translation software struggle with the unprecedented tonal combinations. Elder Crix's voice carried a note of alarm. The cubs are entering the second phase of bonding behavior. They will begin testing boundaries, seeking physical contact with their chosen heart family. What happens if they cross the 50-meter line? David asked. The bonding becomes permanent and irreversible. But more importantly, their adult guardians will interpret such contact as a threat requiring immediate protective intervention. The other adult thornbacks had indeed arranged themselves in defensive positions, their spinal ridges fully extended and their crystal formations blazing with warning colors. Their grinding voices created low, threatening harmonics that made the air vibrate with tension. You're saying that if we let them approach, you'll attack us? Rick asked. We will protect our young by any means necessary, the red-crystaled thornback confirmed, even if it means protecting them from themselves. The largest cub created a new harmonic sequence, more insistent than before, and began moving toward the 50-meter boundary again. The other cubs joined their voices to its song, creating a chorus that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Tom's equipment registered massive spikes in the Cubs' electromagnetic output. They're overloading their own systems. If they keep this up, they could damage their crystal formations permanently. Amy made a decision that would change everything. What if one of us approached them, just close enough to calm them down? Absolutely not, Elder Crick said immediately. Such contact would complete the bonding process and create a situation we cannot control or reverse. But they're hurting themselves trying to reach us, Amy argued. As a scientist and as someone who cares about their well-being, I can't just watch them suffer. The Cubs' harmonics became more desperate, and their crystal formations began generating heat, a sign that they were willing to damage themselves to cross the distance separating them from their chosen family. Tom stood up, his decision made. I can't watch this either. Before anyone could stop him, Tom walked across the 50-meter boundary toward the Cubs. The moment he crossed the invisible line, several things happened simultaneously. The Cubs' distress signals ceased immediately, replaced by harmonics of pure joy that resonated across the crystal forest. Their formations blazed with brilliant, synchronized light that painted the entire camp in rainbow colors. The adult thornbacks' defensive postures shifted to something between alarm and amazement, their weapons-ready crystal formations retracting slightly. Most remarkably, the Cubs began to physically change. Their crystal formations expanded and reshaped themselves, creating what appeared to be protective barriers around Tom while maintaining openings that allowed him to breathe and move freely. Impossible, Elder Crix whispered, the grinding voice. Filled with awe, Tom found himself surrounded by 6 massive, gentle beings whose crystal formations had adapted to create a perfect environment for human comfort. The temperature within their protective circle was exactly what he found most comfortable, and the air itself seemed charged with feelings of safety and contentment. The largest cub lowered its massive head until it was level with Tom's, and for the first time they made direct eye contact. The cub's crystal formations created soft, welcoming patterns while it generated the most beautiful harmonic sequence Tom had ever heard. Tom, what's happening to them? Amy called from beyond the boundary. Tom reached out slowly and touched the largest cub's crystal formation. It was warm and smooth, and the moment he made contact, the cub's entire body pulsed with waves of colored light that seemed to match Tom's heartbeat. They're not just bonding with me, Tom realized. They're adapting themselves to make the bond possible. Dr. Amy watched her instruments in amazement. The cub's crystal formations are generating sustainable life support. They're creating a habitat that allows extended human contact. Elder Crix approached the boundary of the cub's protective circle, moving slowly to avoid startling anyone. In our oldest legends, we speak of cubs who find their heart family and evolve beyond normal thornback limitations. We call them crystal singers, and we believe them to be myths. What does that mean? David asked. It means, Crix said quietly, that your species may have triggered something that hasn't happened in our recorded history. The cubs are not just bonding, they are transforming themselves to make an impossible relationship possible. The cubs' harmonics grew more complex, incorporating new tones that seemed designed specifically for human ears. Their crystal formations continued to adapt, creating communication interfaces that bypassed the need for translation equipment. Tom could suddenly understand their music as clearly as spoken language. The cubs were singing about family, about belonging, about finding beings who made them feel safe and loved in ways they had never experienced before. They're not just choosing us as heart family, Tom said softly. They're choosing to become something new, something that can exist in both our worlds. The question that hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present, was simple and terrifying. What happened next when 6 alien cubs had bonded so completely with humans that they were willing to evolve themselves to maintain that connection? The Thornback Council chamber was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Carved from a single massive crystal formation deep beneath the planet's surface, the space resonated with the voices of hundreds of adult thornbacks whose combined harmonics created a sound like mountains singing. Dr. Amy stood beside Captain David at the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings whose crystal formations towered above them like living cathedrals. Elder Crix had arranged this emergency gathering after the Cub's transformation, and the atmosphere felt heavy with the weight of unprecedented decisions. In 30,000 years of Thornback civilization, no Cubs have ever undergone spontaneous evolution in response to heart-family bonding, announced Elder Voth, whose ancient crystal formations had grown so complex they resembled elaborate geometric sculptures. The implications are beyond our ability to predict or control. Tom remained with the Cubs at the surface, unable to leave the protective circle they had created around him. His voice came through the communication link, slightly distorted by the Cubs' electromagnetic fields but clearly concerned. The Cubs are becoming restless. Their harmonics are shifting to frequencies that suggest anxiety about being separated from the rest of us. Captain David looked around the assembled council, noting how their crystal formations flickered between colors that suggested both fascination and fear. What exactly are you most concerned about? The Cubs seem healthy and happy. Elder Crix's massive form moved closer, crystal formations grinding softly against each other. The concern is not their current state. The concern is what they are becoming and what that means for both our species. The Cubs have demonstrated abilities that exceed adult Thornback capabilities, added Council Member Jex, whose blue-tinted crystals pulsed with analytical patterns. They are generating sustainable atmospheric conditions, creating electromagnetic shields, and most remarkably, they appear to be developing direct neural interface capabilities with your species. Amy felt a chill. Neural interface? Tom hasn't mentioned anything like that. Your companion may not be aware of it yet, Elder Voth explained. But our deep sensors detect synaptic resonance patterns between the Cubs and the human within their protective circle. They are not just adapting their environment, they are beginning to share consciousness. The communication link crackled as Tom's voice came through again. Something's happening here. The Cubs are creating new crystal formations, and I'm starting to understand their communications without translation equipment. Dr. Amy exchanged worried glances with Captain David. Tom, describe exactly what you're experiencing. It's like learning a new language, but not through words. I can feel what they're feeling: curiosity, contentment, and something that feels like protective love. They're worried about us being so far away from them. Elder Crix's crystal formations shifted to deeper, more serious colors. The neural bonding process has begun. Within days, your companion and our Cubs will share thoughts, emotions, and potentially memories. The connection cannot be severed without causing permanent psychological damage to all participants. But that could be incredible, Amy said, her scientific curiosity overriding her concern. True interspecies communication and understanding. Or, it could be catastrophic, Council Member Jax replied. We do not know how human consciousness will interact with Thornback mental structures. The Cubs could lose their individual identity, or your companion could lose his. The chamber filled with grinding harmonics as the council members discussed the situation in their own language. Their crystal formations created complex light patterns that seemed to represent different viewpoints and concerns. Tom's voice came through the communicator again, now carrying a note of wonder. The Cubs are showing me images through their crystal formations, memories of their lives before we arrived, their families, their understanding of the universe. It's beautiful, but it's also overwhelming. Tom, you need to try to maintain some distance from the neural interface, Captain David ordered. Don't let yourself get lost in their consciousness. I'm not sure I can control it anymore, Tom admitted. The connection is getting stronger on its own, but it doesn't feel dangerous. It feels like coming home. Elder Voth addressed the humans directly, the ancient voice carrying centuries of wisdom and worry. Your species possesses something our Cubs have never encountered, the ability to form emotional bonds across any barrier. This trait calls to the deepest part of their nature. Other species in our galaxy have encountered Thornback Cubs without triggering bonding behavior, Elder Crix added. But your kind radiates what we can only describe as unconditional acceptance. It is irresistible to beings who crave absolute safety and belonging. Amy tried to process the implications. So this isn't just about these 6 cubs? Any Thornback cubs who encounter humans will potentially bond with them? The probability is extremely high, Councilmember Jex confirmed, which creates a problem that extends far beyond this single incident. The communication link brought Tom's voice again, but now it carried harmonics that sounded almost like Thornback's speech. The cubs want to know why their families are afraid. They can sense the fear and confusion in the council chamber, and it's making them distressed. Tom, are you still in control of your own thoughts? Amy asked urgently. Yes, but it's like having 6 additional perspectives on everything. I can feel what they feel, understand what they need. And somehow I know that they'll do anything to protect not just me, but all of you. Elder Crix moved to the center of the chamber, crystal formations blazing with decision-making patterns. The council must choose between 3 options, none of which have acceptable outcomes. What are the options? David asked. First, we can attempt forced separation of your companion from our cubs. This will likely result in permanent catatonic states for the cubs and severe psychological trauma for your team member. Amy shook her head immediately. That's not acceptable. Second, we can allow the bonding process to complete naturally and observe the results. This could lead to unprecedented interspecies evolution, or it could result in the loss of individual identity for all participants. And the third option? David asked, though he suspected he already knew. Your people leave our world immediately, taking your companion with you. The cubs will be unable to follow due to their biological requirements, and separation across interstellar distances might weaken the bond sufficiently to prevent complete neural integration. Tom's voice came through the communicator with surprising firmness. I can hear everything you're saying through the cubs' enhanced senses. That third option isn't viable. Why not? Amy asked. Because the cubs have made their choice and they're not going to let distance or space travel change it. They're already adapting their crystal formations to create portable life support systems. They're planning to come with us wherever we go. The council chamber erupted in grinding harmonics as hundreds of adult Thornbacks responded to this revelation. Their crystal formations blazed with alarm, creating a light show that was both beautiful and terrifying. Elder Voth's ancient voice cut through the chaos. Cubs cannot survive away from our crystal forests. Their developing formations require specific mineral supplements and electromagnetic fields that exist only on our world. Then they're creating those conditions artificially, Tom replied. I can see the process through our shared connection. They're building everything they need to survive anywhere, as long as they can stay with their chosen family. Dr. Amy stared at the communication device, understanding finally dawning. They're not just bonding with us. They're preparing to leave their entire world behind to stay with us. That level of commitment and sacrifice is unprecedented in Thornback history, Elder Crix said quietly. Cubs who would abandon their home. World for an alien species represent a fundamental change in our understanding of bonding behavior. Captain David felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What happens if we stay? If we don't try to leave and just let this process continue? Then we enter completely unknown territory, Councilmember Jex replied. 6 Thornback cubs who have evolved beyond normal parameters, bonded to a human who is developing alien neural capabilities, creating a hybrid family unit that has never existed before. Tom's voice came through the communicator one more time, now carrying definitive resolve. The cubs want me to tell you something. They say that family isn't about biology or species or even staying in familiar places. Family is about choosing to protect and care for each other no matter what challenges arise. And they've chosen us, Amy said quietly. Yes, but more than that, they're choosing to become whatever they need to become to make this family work. The council chamber fell silent as hundreds of ancient beings contemplated a future none of them had ever imagined, a future where the rigid structures that had protected their species for millennia were being rewritten by 6 cubs who had found something worth transforming themselves to keep. 6 months had passed since the Council's decision to allow the unprecedented bonding experiment to continue. The research station had transformed into something that defied classification, part human technology, part Thornback crystal architecture, and entirely unique in the galaxy. Tom sat within the cub's protective circle, no longer distinguishable as separate from his adopted family. The neural bonding had stabilized into something remarkable. He retained his human identity and memories while gaining access to the cub's collective consciousness and abilities. His hair had begun growing with crystalline strands that sparkled in the light, and his eyes now reflected the same rainbow patterns as the cub's. FOR Matero LS. Dr. Amy approached the boundary of what the cubs now called their harmony space. The 6 Thornback cubs had grown larger over the months, their crystal formations more complex and beautiful than any adult Thornback structure. Most remarkably, they had learned to create temporary extensions of their harmony space that allowed other humans to join them for brief periods. Tom, we're receiving transmission requests from Earth, Amy announced. The Federation Science Council wants a full report on the bonding project. Tom's response came not just as words but as harmonics that the cubs translated into human speech through their evolved crystal formations. Tell them we're ready to share what we've learned, but they need to understand that this isn't just a scientific curiosity anymore. We've become something new. Captain David joined Amy at the boundary, carrying reports from the Aurora's edge. Crew who had chosen to remain and study the ongoing transformation. The cubs have stabilized their portable life support systems. They could survive indefinitely away from the planet's crystal forests. But they don't want to leave, Tom said, and the cubs' formations pulsed with agreement. This world is their home, and now it's ours too. We've been discussing the possibility of establishing a permanent human Thornback research colony. Amy's scientific excitement was tempered by practical concerns. The political implications are enormous. Earth has never established a permanent colony based on interspecies bonding. Elder Crix approached from the direction of the Thornback settlement, accompanied by several council members whose crystal formations showed colors of acceptance and curiosity rather than the fear and suspicion that had dominated their early interactions. The council has reached a unanimous decision, Crix announced through the universal translator. We wish to formalize the relationship between our species through the establishment of what your people might call an embassy. An embassy? David asked. Council member Jex stepped forward, crystal formations creating patterns of explanation. The cubs have taught us much about the nature of bonding in family. We have observed that human capacity for emotional connection extends beyond just our young ones. Adult humans demonstrate the same unconditional acceptance that triggered the cubs' bonding response. Tom's voice carried harmonics of amusement. They're saying that humans are naturally good at making family connections with almost anyone, even scary crystal aliens who initially threatened them. The cubs wish to be ambassadors, Elder Crix continued. They want to help both species understand that family can transcend biological limitations. Amy watched as the cubs' crystal formations created new patterns. She had never seen before complex geometric designs that seemed to represent bridges or connections. They've been planning this, haven't they? For months, Tom confirmed. Through our shared consciousness, I can see their long-term thinking. They believe that humans and Thornbacks together could solve problems that neither species could handle alone. What kind of problems? David asked. The largest cub, who had become Tom's primary bonding partner, created a series of harmonic sequences that Tom translated. They're showing me images of other worlds, other species that are struggling with isolation and fear. They believe the bonding techniques they've developed could help establish peaceful contact with civilizations that have been unreachable before. Elder Voth's ancient voice carried notes of wonder. In our oldest crystal songs, we speak of a time when all species would find harmony through understanding rather than conquest. The cubs believe they have found the key to making those songs into reality. Amy felt a chill of recognition. They want to use the bonding process to create interspecies diplomatic teams. Not forced bonding, Tom clarified quickly. Voluntary. Connection based on mutual respect and genuine care. The cubs have learned to control their bonding abilities, to offer connection without overwhelming other beings' autonomy. Captain David considered the implications. You're talking about revolutionizing how species interact across the galaxy. The cubs prefer to think of it as teaching everyone how to be family, Tom said, his voice carrying harmonics of hope and determination. The communication array crackled as Engineer Rick's voice came through from the Aurora's edge. Captain, we're receiving priority messages from Earth Command. They want to send a diplomatic mission to formalize first contact protocols. Elder Crix's crystal formations shifted to welcoming colors. We would be honored to receive official representatives from your world. The cubs are excited about the possibility of meeting more humans. Amy looked at Tom, still surrounded by his crystalline family, still human but transformed into something more. Tom, do you have any regrets about how this turned out? Tom's response came through both human speech and Thornback harmonics, translated simultaneously by the cubs' evolved abilities. I've gained 6 brothers and sisters who would cross the galaxy to protect me, learn to communicate on levels I never imagined possible, and become part of something that could change how species relate to each other forever. How could I regret that? The cubs' formations blazed with shared joy, creating light patterns that painted the entire settlement in rainbow colors. Their harmonic songs rose to include not just Tom but Amy, David, and the approaching Thornback elders, creating a musical conversation that needed no TRANSLATION. Dr. Amy activated her recording equipment to document the moment for the historical archives, personal log, supplemental. The bonding experiment has succeeded beyond all expectations. The cubs have not only adapted to maintain their connection with human consciousness, but have evolved capabilities that could reshape interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. More importantly, she continued, watching Tom laugh at something, one of the cubs had communicated directly to his mind. They've proven that family truly is a choice, not a biological inevitability. The cubs chose us, we chose them, and together we've created something that neither species could have achieved alone. The largest cub approached the boundary of the harmony space and extended one of its crystal formations toward Amy. She reached out tentatively and touched the warm, smooth surface. Immediately, her mind filled with images and emotions, the cubs' joy at finding their human family, their determination to bridge the gap between species, and their hope for a future where understanding replaced fear across the galaxy, their offering to share the bonding experience with anyone who wants to understand what they've learned, Amy realized. Not permanent bonding, just enough connection to truly comprehend what they've discovered about family and belonging. Elder Crix observed the interaction with what could only be interpreted as approval. The cubs have become teachers as well as ambassadors. They carry the wisdom of both species now, and they wish to share that wisdom with anyone ready to receive it. As the alien suns set over the crystal forests of Kepler 438c, the hybrid settlement buzzed with activity. Humans and Thornbacks worked together to construct communication arrays that would link their world to Earth and the Thornback homeworlds. The cubs moved between both groups, translating not just language but intent and emotion, helping both species understand each other in ways that formal diplomacy never could. Tom stood at the center of it all, no longer quite human but not alien either, something new. Something that proved evolution wasn't just about biology, but about the choices beings made to care for each other across any divide. The cubs had been right from the beginning. They hadn't just found their heart family among the humans. They had found the key to helping the entire galaxy discover what it meant to belong to something larger than themselves, to choose connection over isolation, and to prove that the most powerful force in the universe was the simple willingness to call someone else family, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. In the growing darkness, the cubs' crystal formations provided light and warmth for their expanding family, singing harmonies that carried across the planet and out into space, a song that told anyone listening that home was not a place but a choice, and family was not about species, but about the decision to protect and cherish each other across any distance, any difference, any challenge the universe might offer.